Hey, it's Phil here. It's Q&A number 8, and we're going to do part 2 of Chris Scott's question. So in the last one, Chris asked me about the biggest hurdle I'd overcome. We talked about the whole radio job thing and all that kind of stuff. But his other question for me is a much simpler one. He said, who are your biggest influences in comedy and music? And the way that I work, there's always influences in my head. Sometimes there are people that I love. Sometimes I'm specifically working from a source of something I dislike considerably because it works for what I'm doing. And there have been instances where, I've pulled in some cheesy disco things or whatever, stuff that is I'm using ironically because it's funny in the song. Anyway, my biggest influences, let's talk music first. Prince, number one, above all. I own so much Prince in my catalog of music that I listen to. Bootlegs and just crazy, anything I can find by Prince, I will listen to it. He's my top guy. And the thing is, any influence that I name has their own influences. So not inadvertently, but tangentially, I am also influenced by James Brown and Miles Davis and Parliament Funkadelic because those all figure into Prince's work. And I love all those artists as well. Got to see James Brown in the front row. Ooh, it was so great. Such a great show. Definitely was a very fun event. So Prince, just everything. The prolificness, the work ethic, the inventiveness, the ability and willingness to go absolutely anywhere the music needed to. The best. I was so entirely shook when he died. Just wrecked. Absolutely wrecked. Anyway, so Prince is a big one. If you've been hanging out in my community for any length of time, you've heard me mention Butch Walker before. Butch Walker came up in a band called South Gang in the late 80s that was, only mildly successful. Did some other things. He had a big hit in the 90s, late 90s, with a band called Marvelous 3. They had a song called Freak of the Week. That was a big single for them that launched Butch's career as a producer as well. And then he started doing solo work with a variety of backing musicians. And he is, if there is a master of the rock music form, it is Butch Walker. I heard a quote one time that said, there are only two kinds of people in the world, people who love Butch Walker and people who have not heard about him yet. He's just a phenomenal talent, an amazing performer, and an amazing songwriter, and an amazing producer. And he is one of the guys that when I'm working on my songs, I go, what would Butch do with this? And the Wild Hearts, I love the Wild Hearts. They're a British band. Again, the inventiveness, the profusion of riffs that they just stuff into every song. They're great, just songwriters. Ginger Wildheart does most of their songwriting, the singer. Just phenomenally cool, fun, hooky. I love the vocal harmonies they use, all that kind of stuff. So the Wild Hearts are a big one. Aerosmith is one of my all-time favorite bands. I am currently trying to convince myself to fork out the money to go see them in Las Vegas. And the coolness of it. There's something so primal and so basically awesome about what Aerosmith does. And of course, like we talked, that's also the Beatles and the Stones and Zeppelin. Right? Because you put those together and you get Aerosmith. But there's something about that band that I find very magical. And I've seen them a bunch of times and they're always great. They're kind of a foundational bedrock in my musical brain. There's other stuff that pops up musically. Like I said, sometimes I work with things that I don't particularly like. Kitties and Boobs, my last single, is a very good example of that. I don't like EDM music, but I knew that song needed elements of that style to communicate the story, to communicate the vibe of that tune. So I went and did that because it worked for the song. So there's always that. Walt Disney has always been a huge influence on my music and my art, and how I like it to be very colorful and I like it to be bright. And of course Walt Disney's songwriters, all Frank Churchill, and I'm spacing on names now, but Menken, Alan Menken, all of them over the years have had great things to do. There's always such inventive chord changes. Like if you really look into some of those, there's really solid songwriting in that Disney music, especially the early stuff through the 60s There's a fallow period in the 70s and 80s where it gets a little weird, and then of course it's just Broadway after that, which has its own pros and cons to it. So anyway, those are the musical influences. If we're talking about stand-up comedy influences, Robin Williams early on, I could recite the entire Live at the Met album when I was a kid. I hate to say it, Bill Cosby was an early influence. He's a terrible human being, and I disown him at this point, but I listened to a ton of Bill Cosby when I was a kid. All the old Noah records and things like that. So I'm sure the style still filters into my work a little bit. But granted, a horrible human being who should still be in jail. More current, Christopher Titus is a huge influence on me, and he's given me some good advice over the years and things like that. He's a great guy, and I love the attack on issues that he takes and the attack on his own issues that he takes. I think it's fantastic. Eddie Izzard, huge. Eddie Izzard is a huge influence. Like, if I listen to too much Eddie Izzard, I will start talking like her, and I have to be careful to not deliver jokes in her style. I'm still getting used to her. Sorry, Eddie. But it's such a different style. The whole British style is very different from the American style anyway, and I love British comedy because of that. And Eddie's style within British comedy is completely different again, and it's a very specific style that I really, really just love. And I love the history jokes and just how she talks about things that no other comics are discussing, the history jokes and things like that. I love that kind of stuff. Ralphie May was a big influence on me. I sat one night and watched Ralphie for 4 hours. He was playing a club the night before I was, and I got into town early and went and saw both of Ralphie's shows that night, just to watch him work. And I always would watch Ralphie work anytime I got a chance to. He was also a very nice guy, and just same thing. He would go anywhere. He would talk about what he wanted to, and if you don't like it, then that's your problem. And I really admired that about Ralphie. Even more, Bob Goldthwa, who, is stand-up. All right, it was gimmicky at the beginning of his career with the weird voice and things like that. But I always thought he was very funny. I watched him growing up. And even now, he is a hilarious stand-up. He's dropped the gimmick. But he is a very, very funny writer. But more than that, I really appreciate the way that he moved his career into. He started making films that just are, oh man, his films are good. I haven't met Bob yet, and I was supposed to open for him one time, and he had to cancel the weekend that I was supposed to open for him because he had to film something, and I was so bummed that I didn't. So I'm still looking forward to working with Bob Goldthwa because he really is an early influence. And then let's see, who else is on my list here? Jackie Kashian. I found just in the last few years, and I know Jackie, and she's a wonderful person. She's a phenomenally talented comic, and another one that I have to watch myself. If I watch Jackie too much, I will start delivering jokes like her, and I have to kind of catch myself. I think she's got a great style and a really great outlook on everything to do with comedy. She's fantastic. The other one is Laurie Kilmartin, and Laurie is fearless. Laurie is fearless. She did an entire album about the death of her father, and it is great. So Laurie is just such a phenomenal writer that can make you laugh at things that make you go, oh man, I should not laugh at that. And it's just such a scream. So if any of those folks you haven't heard yet, please go experience them in one way or another, and they are all great. And that's it. So those are my main influences. I'm sure there's some other ones. I am constantly absorbing comedy and music, whether it's something that I would normally listen to or not. I'm constantly absorbing things, and it all filters into my work somewhere. And that's how art works. It's creative stealing constantly. All right, there it is. Thanks, you guys.